one of the more interesting ideas that hasn't been entirely resolved, but I think there's some leaning towards which way it might go is what if the AI comes up with the new idea? What if is can AI be an inventor?
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of the various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Kyri Tsircou, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Tsircou Intellectual Property Law. Kyri, how are you doing today?
Oh, great, Justin. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, as always, let's jump over first and take a look at his website. This is Tsircou Law. That is TSIRCOULAW.com. It's a good, I believe, Greek name. Yeah. And then so you can visit him. Well, as always, we'll have the link down below in the description. He does offer a free consultation, and he focuses, as we're going to see today, in intellectual property law, amongst other things. So if you have an issue related to intellectual property, give him a call at 818-960-7749 or schedule a free consultation by visiting his website. Again, link in the description down below. Before we get started, we're going to jump over and really quickly read from our two sponsors at the top of the hour. Sponsor number one is Groove Funnels. If you love spending $5,000 to build a brand new website and you love paying hundreds of dollars every single month to host on a platform that allows you to sell products to your potential clients or customers, then by all means, keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one website funnel sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsaime. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost. Really, truly at no cost. There's no cost, no credit card is needed, and you can actually build, I believe, up to 3 fully functioning websites. They have a huge list of apps for their platform that basically turns it into an all-in-one platform for whatever you need. Sales funnels, websites, blogs. They have affiliate programs. They've got webinar platform and basically everything you can think of. And you can get started completely for free and build out a website that you can design anything you can think of. So visit theattorneypost.com/groove today to sign up, again, completely for free. Our second sponsor today is nationalerc.org. You may have noticed that the world went through a pandemic recently, and many businesses were forced to shut down, had reduced hours, had supply chain issues and interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress passed the CARES Act, and the CARES Act basically allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It is essentially free money for your business that can be spent in whatever way you think makes the most sense. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much you can get by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business that they work with gets over $200,000 back that they can invest in their business, and that money, again, never needs to be paid back. The calculator is completely free, and there's never any fee unless they secure funding for you. Please visit nationalerc.org or visit the link that we have below in the description to learn more. All righty. So again, today I have the privilege of hosting Kyriacos, who is a mastermind in the realm of intellectual property law and a key figure in the emerging new space sector. Kyri's journey is one of illustrious pursuits, from graduating from the United States Air Force Academy with a BS in Astronautical Engineering to serve 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Air Force. And again, I always like to say thank you for your service. Following his military tenure, he made his mark on the legal world with his stellar performance in one of the nation's largest firms. His reputation for securing patent rights, both domestically and internationally, is backed by a diverse portfolio of clients, including Poquito Mas, Dezeen, I'm going to pronounce these terribly, Design Technologies, or Design Technologies, TaylorMade Golf Company, etc. His intellectual curiosity did not stop at the Earth's atmosphere, as he also represents companies in the private exploration of space. As the founder of Tsircou Intellectual Property Law and a partner with Syndicate 702, the accelerator and investment group for startups, Kyri blends his technological expertise and business acumen to drive innovation and to protect innovation. So it's with great pleasure that we welcome Kyri to the show. And Kyri, my first question for you, as always, is what did I miss? Because I'm sure there's a lot more that can be said about you than what I can sum up in a short paragraph.
Well, great. No, thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate the introduction. You really appreciate hitting on all the highlights I think one thing I would point out from my background that I think has really guided my profession has been early on in my young adult life, serving active duty and the experience I got working as a young officer in the Air Force. That experience was important in several respects. It gave me a good perspective of what it's like to have leadership and that type of responsibility at a young age, and also got some really interesting exposure to the Air Force's space systems and how our government relies upon space to serve our national defense.
Gotcha. Well, again, thank you very much for your service to our country. I always love working with anyone who is who's done their best and served their country. So it's greatly respected. If I didn't know anything about you, and you and I were stuck in an elevator for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever, and I said, hey, what do you do? How could you sum up what you do in 30 seconds or a minute? Give me the pitch for your firm. Who do you work with? What sorts of things do you do? What's the scope of your practice, so on and so forth?
I guess the short and sweet is we work with our clients to develop their IP portfolio strategy to include protecting the ideas that they're coming up with and guarding against any sorts of risks that they might encounter as they go along in their business, particularly as it relates to IP, their IP and IP rights of others.
Okay, very good. Here's a quick side question, and I don't know if this will affect much. Obviously, one of my sponsors is National ERC and the whole discussion about the pandemic. And I've talked to attorneys across the country and even internationally at this point, and it's just interesting to see how the pandemic and the response to the pandemic affected them and their practice. Just out of curiosity, how did it affect you? Is it something I don't know the scope of your practice and how you work with clients? If it used to be all face to face and now it's all Zoom, if you just Zoomed intensely during. I mean, I've met with clients that had to do hearings and depositions via Zoom, which was a big change for them. How did the pandemic and the response to the pandemic affect you in your practice of law, Kyri?
As far as the day-to-day piece of it, working with clients, one of the first steps when you're working with a client is to get a download from them, what the good idea of what their business is, the technologies they're working on, the type of innovation that they're proceeding with, and oftentimes there's been a good piece of that has been face to face. You sit down, you brainstorm on the idea, on the things that they're working on, and I always found that face to face part of that really helps. Now, transitioning during the pandemic, of course, that wasn't available, so we may do with Zoom meetings and those types of things. But you really miss out on holding the product, looking at bouncing ideas back and forth, and so that was a challenge transitioning. Now we've all gotten used to that, so doing these Zooms are a bit more bit more of our reality.
Yeah,
I think that was one of the challenges proceeding down during the pandemic time. And then of course there was also the idea of all businesses were impacted in different ways by the economic hit of the pandemic. So some clients, they just proceeded right ahead. Others were really impacted by it. So there was that variation in how it impacted the clients as well.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And again, I think everybody's experience was very different. One of the reasons I rebooted the podcast, in fact, is all of a sudden everyone knew how to Zoom, and so having people on and doing a quick Zoom call was super easy. So there's silver linings to it, to be sure. So let me ask you this, Kyri, what got you into law in the first place? You're in the Air Force, and eventually you get out of the Air Force, but did you always have law in the background? Is that something that, the kids are playing G.I. Joe, you're playing Perry Mason, or, is it something you kind of just found you had an aptitude for? What got you into law, and then what got you into intellectual property law?
Yeah, interesting question. Thank you. It's coming out of high school, you always meet with these counselors, and you take these tests as to what might be a good career path for you. And patent law was one of the things that kind of popped up in the category of things that my aptitude fit well for. So always had it in the back of my mind. But going into the Air Force Academy, that wasn't an immediate path coming out of the academy. So it was just something that was always floating in the background for me. But at the academy, I had the strong interest of going into engineering, and in freshman year, I narrowed it down between comp sci and astronautical engineering, and then also some aeronautical was on the list there as well. But just had a strong draw towards the astronautical engineering, and I ended up with an emphasis on control systems, so that brought in some of the comp sci piece, the working with algorithms and those things as well. That was an important part of the control systems portion of the astronautical engineering track.
Gotcha. So what would you say made your Air Force experience, I guess, how did it influence your approach to intellectual property law? Is it because you worked with these complex systems that you just kind of understood it and it made it more of a natural transition, or did it affect it at all? Is it what? Give me the real inside. Like, how do you make that transition, and how does it shape what you do?
Sure. I find that my education, along with my early career as a space operations officer working in the Air Force, has played a strong role in how I look at problems, the breadth of information and technical exposure to different types of technology that I had in those early days makes it easy. I feel like I'm in a strong position to understand a very pretty broad swath of technology. So the idea of translating technical jargon into legal jargon. Earlier when I was in the Air Force, we were translating technical jargon into managerial speak, right? So we're talking to the tech guys, taking that information and presenting it to leadership and making that translation. So it's a similar skill set. We're just the end audience is just a bit different.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. So let me ask you this. I'm sure people come to you a lot and they've got questions. Maybe they have ideas or misconceptions about what you do, what you can't do, what they need to do, what they don't need to do. What would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions people bring into your office about, patent law and intellectual property? Like, what if you could clear up one of the most common questions people bring in, or common misconceptions, what would that be?
There are a few. One of the primary issues that I try and bring forward to clients right away, particularly on the technology piece of their business, is when you're coming up with the concepts and you're disclosing the concepts. As soon as there's that public disclosure of the idea that you have, then two things happen. One, you start a deadline to file for any patent in the U.S. And if you're interested in foreign patent protection, then you really need to start that process before that disclosure. So getting that information early on to inventors and making sure as a company becomes more established that they have those timelines in mind as they're developing their products and their technology, so that they don't, so they're not inadvertently losing protection that they might otherwise want. In the end, it's a decision. If it doesn't make business sense to either file a patent on the technology, or maybe it's not patentable, then you proceed as you should. But it's important to integrate that into your development process, whether you're just coming up with the idea and what do I do next?
Yeah.
So that's a concern. And sometimes there's the thought that, well, I'm going to put this off. I want to see if this has legs before I take any next steps with it. And unfortunately, if that's the path you choose, then sometimes you lose rights that you might want.
Gotcha. I don't know if this is going to sound like a random out of left field question, but something I remember hearing about years ago was what they called the poor man's patent, or the poor man's copyright. where if you have an idea and you want to prove that it's yours, you can basically write it up and then mail it to yourself in a certified envelope and just leave it sealed. Is there any truth to that at all, or is that just the dumbest thing ever? Because I honestly don't know if that's something that could stand up in a court of law to prove that the idea was yours before a certain time, or if that even is an issue that matters, or if that's anywhere in your scope of knowledge. But I figured
Sure.
what you just said made me think of that, so I figured I'd at least ask you that. It's a random question, but
Well, the reason that idea came up is years back. I think it must our patent system has transitioned from what was identified as a conception, reduction to practice filing system. So your ability to assert you were the first inventor, to do that, you needed to show that I conceived of the idea before you. Not that I necessarily filed it, but I came up with the idea first. That concept is no longer in U.S. patent law. Now it's simply a first to file system. Whoever files the patent application on the idea has a priority to that particular invention. And again, that there are a number of other issues that come into play. The second one, which I previously mentioned, is that not only do you need to be the first person to file, but that idea cannot have been publicly available, particularly for the person who came up with it, for greater than a year, or if someone else came up with the idea before you and it was out there, that could impact your ability to patent it as well.
Gotcha. So
I guess the short answer to that is no, it doesn't work anymore.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you are looking to poor man's patent something, just let it go, man. Doesn't work. Okay, so my trade personally is digital marketing. I do it on a very regular basis, and over the last probably 5 years, I've been incorporating things like artificial intelligence or AI into a lot of what I do. I have to imagine that AI is doing a lot to change the entire. It's changing the whole world. We are at a moment of a true paradigm shift. How do you see AI and automation impacting intellectual property law in the future? How do you see what are some of the biggest trends or shifts that you see coming down the pipeline due to AI?
There AI is popping up with regard to IP in a few different areas. One of the more interesting ideas that hasn't been entirely resolved, but I think there's some leaning towards which way it might go, is what if the AI comes up with a new idea? What if can AI be an inventor? Right. So that's a question that's out there, and that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has been briefing and holding presentations on how this issue might be resolved. So that's one piece of it. Another part is, of course, people are coming up with new ways to design AI. Right, here's a unique algorithm. Here's the data set that we're using to train this system. Or did that programmer, did that inventor come up with a new and unique way to set up an AI system? If so, is that concept patentable? And another issue is just AI as a tool for inventors, as a tool for attorneys, and that piece of it as well. To what extent can you rely upon an AI system to draft a portion of a patent application, to analyze or assess claim sets, to review a database of patents and identify the ones that might be most relevant to your concept, to help narrow down the focus of what the inventor or the patent attorney might be looking at? And so it covers I'm interested to see how all of this plays out as it relates to my field and to my for my clients as well.
Gotcha. You're free to just dodge this question, because I have to imagine most people don't have a formed opinion on it. But how do you feel about the idea of AI coming up with ideas? Like, who do you think would get the rights to that? If you were to right now, with someone comes in right now, I need you to make a decision on this right now because we have this issue. Who do you think it would be? The programmer of the AI, the person who provided the data set, the person who asked the prompt? Could the AI itself get the right to its own patentable ideas? Like, what do you think the solution to that would even look like?
Yeah, and I think in the end, I would consider AI as a tool, right? So there's someone who's using that tool to solve a problem. To the extent that the person used that tool and the solution is something that's patentable, I would typically lean towards here's the inventor who presented this unique question in a way that provided a solution, and then what that solution is, whether that meets standards of patentability, then that would be the next thing. So generally, that's how I would consider it. Then, but again, then as many people are asking similar questions, then who ends up, then we get into the first to invent concept or first to file the patent application on that particular approach to solving that problem.
They said the most recent iterations of Chat GPT were able to pass the bar with like 90% competency. So I can foresee a future where Chat GPT comes up with an idea and realizes, hey, I should patent this, and then files the paperwork on its own behalf. I don't know. I'm sure that there's some steps in it that probably it couldn't take on its own. But 5 or 10 years from now, we could be living in a really weird place. So anyway, I just find those concepts fascinating. I think you're taking the right approach personally from a philosophical perspective. I think that viewing it as a tool, even if it's a very complex tool and a very complex tool that mimics human behavior, I think at the end of the day, it's still a tool personally. And if this is 15 years in the future and the robot overlords see this, I'm sorry, please, have mercy on me. But I think that's a healthy way to do it.
One of the barriers to that is every patent application, the patent office requires that you identify an inventor. Mm-hmm. And to date, they'll only accept humans as being inventors. So even if the AI tried to file the application and not list a human inventor, then the application would be rejected under current standards.
And then the AI learns how to, do identity theft, how to spoof being a human or whatever. It makes for an interesting future. We really are living in the beginning of a really weird sci-fi era. So we'll see what comes from all that. Speaking of sci-fi, you are involved in the new space industry, and you're involved in the new space industry and how intellectual property plays a role in it. What is the new space industry, and how does intellectual property play a role in it?
Sure. So new space it's a fun term that characterizes how current commercial businesses, space-focused businesses, are proceeding. In the past, for the first as we first went into space, it was government actors, right? So there were USSR. They were the principal players in space. They're the ones who had the funding and the ability and the technical know-how to actually perform and to get into space and use space as a resource. And then after a period of time, as the technology evolved, the commercial aspect of space became more and more important. So there were big defense contract type businesses, big companies that had the ability to meet the cost and technical requirements to get satellites into space and to utilize the benefit of it. Now, as the costs of launch continue to go down, it has reduced the barrier of entry to if you're now a startup company can come up with a great idea, get a margin, a decent amount of funding, but not what it would take decades ago, and they can start a space business. And there's all sorts of benefits to having satellites in space. It's great point of Earth observation, communications, the lists of things that you can do from that vantage point are endless. And so now we've transitioned to the point where new space is considered the idea of how these smaller companies or someone with a great idea can actually bring it to fruition and build a company that's focused on providing services for or to with space.
Gotcha. Okay. Again, it feels very sci-fi. Totally tangentially related question. as an intellectual property attorney who works in new frontiers of science and technology, do you like sci-fi? What do you read in your downtime, Kyri?
Other than patents, yeah. When I was a kid, I was big into Star Wars and all of that. So that's always always had a place in my heart, and one of the reasons why I focused on this area. So that's always been something that has been an interest of mine. So that's part of where my heart is.
If you're looking to patent the world's first actual functioning lightsaber, here's your guy right there. Talk to Kyri, because he'll make it happen for you. So you have a role. You are the section chair of the Los Angeles Intellectual Property Association, the LAIPLA. What does that do? What does that mean? What does that entail?
It's a law association for IP attorneys in the Los Angeles area. And when I was serving in that role, I was primarily in charge of the small firm committee, where we serviced or provided resources and opportunities for small firms to interact, talk about challenges that are unique to running a small firm in IP and in LA, and also just provided a great networking opportunity for those types of firms as well. And other than that, LAIPLA is a professional development organization. There'll be meetings about changes in IP law, presentations from the USPTO, and just ways just to keep on top of both the professional side as well as the networking side with your colleagues.
Gotcha. I'm trying to remember, and if I'm wrong on this, correct me if I'm wrong. We were scheduled to do a podcast. We were scheduled to do this podcast like a week or so ago, and it got pushed back a couple times. And so I'm a little fuzzy on the research I had done before, but I seem to recall that you published an analysis of disputes involving reusable rockets or something like that. Can you give me a brief summary of that situation and what your perspective is on it? And if I'm wrong, just let me know.
Sure. So I think I think the question a while back, there was a patent dispute as it related to different patents. There's a patent portfolio that dealt with launch vehicles and how the launch vehicle could land. Whether for example, the SpaceX rocket takes off and it has the ability to land on its end at the end of its mission. So there was an article I wrote a little while back on patents that covered that type of technology and how those patents were enforced against another business that was looking to go in that area as well.
Gotcha. I was looking at my old notes and I was trying to remember what I was coming up with an idea about that. I'm like, I remember there was something there, but that's all right. It's again a neat concept. Again, that's the whole new space aspect, right? You're dealing with all these companies and how they play things out. So how do you balance the technical aspect of your job with the need for strategic thinking and even, I'm sure, negotiation at times? Like how do you find that balance?
It can be a challenge, right? The technical piece is working with clients, understanding their technology, getting into the real nuts and bolts of it all, and applying your background as to how you can help characterize that invention best. And then the strategic piece comes into the next steps, right? When you're consulting with a client, identifying getting a sense from them first where they anticipate their business to be, where their growth projections might be. Here's an area, we're in lane A as far as the technology we're developing, but we anticipate in 5 years we're going to go strictly from, just for an example, servicing client A or servicing the government, to transitioning, also providing a second branch where we're servicing industry in a different way. So then as you're preparing their IP portfolio, you keep in mind where that company will be down 5 years down the road. Because for example, a patent lasts 20 years. So you'll want to position those IP assets in a way that not only protect what they're doing today, but you're taking in mind where the company is going to be 10 years from now.
Gotcha. You said, and I think it was kind of interesting. You said one of the things you do is you, I think you said you have to translate what they're doing and make it, understandable for the average person, and understandable for patent office. Have you ever hit an idea that you just couldn't get your head around, or you really had to like stop and go relearn something in physics or computer science or something in order to really understand what they were trying to get at?
Sure, there are times where there are certain categories of technology that just aren't within my wheelhouse. If it's something that's like a hardcore pharmaceutical type invention, that's something that I would, rather than trying to get up to speed on all of that, I have colleagues that who are chemical engineers or have that more medical background that would be better suited for that type of technology. So oftentimes it's more you're filtering out things that could be better served by someone else. So that's part of, or something that as I've been in 20 plus years as a patent attorney, that I've gotten a real sense of how to filter out things that I think are just not for me.
Gotcha. Okay. That's interesting. I mean, again, I just can't fathom what it'd be like to all of a sudden have someone come and say, "Hey, I want to patent this flip flop floop." And you're like, "The what?" You're just like, I have no idea what you're saying. But again, you're the guy with the aerospace degrees and everything else. So it's kind of curious what kinds of things you would ever run into if you've ever run into it. So that's kind of fascinating. Well, let me ask you this. You've been practicing law for a while. Obviously, nobody bats 1,000, right? I'm sure that you've had some road bumps, maybe even things you would consider a failure in your process of developing your legal skill and your legal prowess. Can you tell my listeners about a time, Kyri, when you experienced something that would be considered a failure or a setback, but what did you learn from it, and how do you carry that forward to make sure that you're best serving your clients moving forward?
Sure, that kind of ties into one of your earlier questions. As a young attorney, I was working on this. It was a really basic invention. It was a cardboard box that you could fold up in a certain way. It would start flat and you fold it up in a certain way. We've all seen those types of things, but it was important enough to this company that they wanted to get a patent on the unique way they designed how to fold up this cardboard box. And at first blush, how are you going to patent a cardboard box? But we were able to get it through. But one thing I really learned from this particular application is the precision you have to use with the words you select in the claim section. So at the end of a patent, there's a claim that provides a list of features that have to be included to infringe that patent, or say it another way, this is what we consider the invention to be. A box that has features A, B, C, D, and E. And in describing one of those features, I chose a word midpoint as opposed to intermediate region. And then we got the patent through. And then after it issued, that haunted me because the word I chose, I just thought was way too narrow. And in the end, it didn't impact the company or that patent was never enforced, but that was a lesson I learned is, take a second, third look at the words you're choosing and why you're choosing them.
I guess you do have to be very precise because, of course, the midpoint would literally be only the point in the middle, right? By definition, whereas, any intermediary point would be a totally different thing. It's anywhere in that spectrum. So if somebody's like, well, it's like a 0.5 millimeter off the center point, so it's not the midpoint, is that kind of the idea where, if you weren't careful or precise or technical with your wording, that would have been a possible problem for the client? Is that the idea?
Exactly.
That's crazy. But it makes sense. I mean, you got to be precise and technical. Well, I'm sure you've also had some amazing successes. I'm sure you've worked with some incredible companies. You've seen some groundbreaking ideas. And now that they're patented, you can probably talk about them. What's one of the biggest successes or most proudest moments, the feather in your cap, so to speak, of your law practice up to this point?
Sure. There are I've had the privilege of working with a lot of great companies who've come up with some really cool ideas. Uh, I used to say I have worked on anything from the cardboard box to brain probes to space launch vehicles. So there's a real spectrum of cool technologies that I've run across. I think one of the more satisfying things is a few times I've worked with companies who are just the solo inventor, or a group of two people who come up with the idea before they even have a company formed, and we start the process with them. And in a few years time span, we get all the IP in place, and they position themselves for a very successful outcome. Whether in one instance it's been they were purchased by a huge multinational company. Other instance that they were able to sell and get a nice nice number on the other side of that. So seeing the success on the other side of it is always gratifying.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Kyri, I appreciate you taking time to talk with me today. I don't want to take up your entire afternoon. So I will we'll wrap this up here in a minute. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you my two final questions. I'll preload those for you now, and then we're going to jump over, take a look at your site, read from our final sponsor. But just so you can be pondering them while we're thinking about this, question number one is going to be this. If you can go back in time, meet a young Kyri fresh at a law school, right? Or even fresh out of the Air Force, I don't know, and give him some advice other than buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold till 60K. Trust me, right? What advice would you give yourself, and why, of course, by extension, anyone else finding themselves in a similar position? And then number two is my magic pen here. If I were to give you my magic pen, and this pen can strike laws from the books, it can edit laws that are already on the books, or it can add a new law to the book. And it can be, a major nationwide or even international sweeping law, or it could be a stupid little law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate 8 times a week. What law would you change and why? So while you're pondering that, let me jump over and we'll take a look at your site again. Again, I'm talking with Kyri Tsircou of the eponymous law firm that bears his name, Tsircou Law. Link in the description down below. That is TSIRCOULAW.com. He offers a free consultation, and his number is 818-960-7749. Link in the descriptions below. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and then to see those articles rank locally, nationally, sometimes in as little as 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and most often, permanently. This is guaranteed SEO, or search engine optimization, on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long-term. Visit rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news to learn more and to book a time to speak with a specialist about getting your firm or your business featured in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page 1 in a matter of hours. It can help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com. All right, so we travel back in time through a as of yet unpatented technology that allows us to do this. And you're able to see and interact with a younger version of yourself. And you're able to give yourself a little bit of advice. Kyri, what advice would you give yourself and why?
Sure. I guess I would, there are different points in my life I would jump back to. I think first coming out of high school, going into college, going to the academy initially, there's some advice around what to brace yourself for as far as being what's called a cadet at the Air Force Academy, kind of bracing myself for that experience. That's something else I think would be helpful to go back and have a talk with that 18-year-old Kyri. And then the second point would be coming out of law school, starting my first job at the big law firm at Shepherd Mullen. There were people that I worked with that were great, and that experience was I got a good bit out of, but there were some things about how to work in that environment that I think I could would have been helpful, to know at that point as well. So yeah, so I would touch on those 2 points, and then I guess lastly, I would jump back to pre-pandemic, how to position my firm to transition through, or to have that infrastructure built out for this thing that was coming down the road. Knowing that beforehand would have been helpful. It's funny that you mentioned the thing about Bitcoin. I remember sitting at my desk back when Bitcoin first came out, and it was I think it was $3 for one Bitcoin at that time. And I was like, oh, this would be fun. Why don't I figure out how to buy some Bitcoin? And I kind of sat there, played with it for a minute, and then got distracted with work and moved on. So I think I would have sat through and finished that transaction as well.
That's funny. There's a couple of stories about Bitcoin that I've found fascinating. Most people have. There's one guy who had Bitcoin in a cold wallet, which, of course, for those of you not in the know, is an offline wallet, basically digital wallet, really, that tracks where it is and the blockchain and everything else. And I think he had something like at the height of Bitcoin anyway, it was probably worth about $250 million in Bitcoin, but his wife or girlfriend or somebody threw it out years ago. And so the question became, is it worth it to try and track down where in a landfill that might have gone and literally do a landfill expedition to find this wallet, because the prize would be billions of dollars in Bitcoin? Or, I don't know if he ever got funding for it or not, but it's such a fascinating question, because it's a modern version of buried treasure, like treasure beyond your wildest dreams or whatnot. So yeah, anyway, it's a fascinating concept, and I still don't understand all of the aspects of it. I had a shop years ago, 2014, and we took Bitcoin back then, but nobody knew how to pay in it, so nobody ever paid me in Bitcoin. But man, if I had a couple of those just sitting around still. I did have a lot of Dogecoin back when it was worth 0.0004 cents a share. I had like a better part of 1 million or so of those. And then when the AMC and GameStop stock debacle happened, my account, I was buying and selling, and my account got frozen, and then it shot up to like 80 cents a coin. And so I basically missed out on $250,000 in Dogecoin due to a Robinhood glitch, which, yeah, that's life, right? So yeah, go back, tell yourself, buy some Bitcoin. That's okay. You can do that too. The Marty McFly and the sports almanac or whatever. Okay. So other question, magic pen time. I give you my pen. You can change any law you want. You can add a new law. You can strike a law from the books. You can edit a law that's already there. It could be a big one. It can have major ramifications for everyone. It doesn't even have to be in your wheelhouse. It could just be like you hate speeding tickets, right? It could be a little tiny law that forces you to fill out forms in triplicate for your clients 8 times a week, whatever it is, right? So if I give you my pen, you can change one law. Kyri, what are you going to change and why?
I'm not. I would look at developing area of law around space and satellite space debris, and how, if a satellite is hit by debris, and who was the source of that debris and all of that. There are international treaties that deal with that on a certain aspect, but the enforcement piece of it is a real challenge. So most law is based national laws, right? So that's how where the enforcement happens. However, when you're dealing in space, and there are actors from all over the world, state actors, businesses that are foreign based, and they impact someone's asset in space. That the enforcement regime around all of that is I think an interesting area going forward, and that hasn't been adequately addressed. So what would the law look like around that? Not exactly sure, but I do know that it's an important area that needs focus as we progress and evolve in that space.
Gotcha. That's a good question. The correct answer is you pronounce yourself God Emperor of the entire known universe, and then you can make whatever changes you want. But that's a good alternate answer, I guess. So, so I've never actually thought about how to cheat my own question until you were talking. I'm like, because I think for you I specified national, international, etc. I'm like, So anyway, well, Kyri, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. Had a lot of fun in the conversation. Got to talk about some interesting topics I don't normally get to talk about. Oftentimes I'm talking about just, I don't want to say pedantic law issues, but I mean, all law is pedantic in some ways. But there's just some fascinating new territory out there that we get to explore. I do always like to let my guest have the final word. Is there any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to impart to our audience before I let you go?
Sure, Justin, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. I guess the last suggestion I would leave, if to the extent that there are inventors or companies out there that are in early stages, just keep IP on the top of your mind so you make good decisions as to what you want to protect, so you file on them when you still have the opportunity to do so. But other than that, I really appreciate the time, and thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was absolutely my pleasure. Well, this has been the Attorney Post. I've been talking with Kyri Tsircou of Tsircou Law. As always, link in the description down below, tsircoulaw.com. Give him a call at 818-960-7749 or visit him online, link in the description, to schedule a free consultation. If you are an inventor, if you have an idea, you need to talk to an attorney. And after our conversation, it seems like Kyri would be a wonderful resource. As always, this podcast, though we deal with legal issues, is not itself does not constitute legal advice. And if you do have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter you need help with. Obviously, having talked to Kyri, as I just said, I think he would be a wonderful resource. So if you are in that area, he does work with people outside of California. He's located in Calabasas, I believe, but he works with people outside of that area as well. So do feel free to reach out to him. I think he would be a wonderful, wonderful resource. As always, if you guys are watching this podcast on YouTube, we appreciate a subscribe, a like, a share, a thumbs up, a comment, whatever you want to do. If you've got a really great idea that you want to patent, leave it down below so I can steal it and then register it with Kyri. That's a joke. And of course, if you're on any other podcast platforms, a like, subscribe, share, rating, whatever it is they let you do always helps us as well. If you know someone that would benefit from seeing this podcast and hearing what Kyri has to say, please feel free to share it as well. And until next time, this is Justin reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.